Now I want to show you some pointers on the taskbar portion of the timeline program. As you can see here, by default, one task is created. You can delete the task and just deal with timeline specifics and not have anything there, and draw your timeline taskbars if you like with the basic PowerPoint tools. But there's an advantage in using the timeline program to generate your taskbars, and that's that when you change something on the overall time scale or want to add something quickly, it dynamically changes where the taskbars are located in relation to the overall timeline based on the dates that you put in there or the other visual attributes. So I'm going to show you, going to add a couple other tasks here to give you an idea of some overall functionality of the task. So the second one, start date and end date, I'm going to bring in a little later than the first task, and I'm going to change the color. And this third task I'm going to make into something called a milestone. A milestone is created by overlapping the start date and the end date. You can either do it by bringing down the date on the end date, like you just saw, or bringing up the date on the start date till they overlap. When they overlap, you'll see this section pop up in which you can determine what the type of milestone you want there, um, or the height and the width of that particular milestone. So let's go ahead and hit build timeline so you can see what's here. Okay, I needed to make this one a little longer than the second one. Okay, great. Um, as we mentioned before, I'll finish out the milestone portion. Height and width can be changed on your milestone with these two functions. Um, you can also change it to something else like right arrow and make it really wide if you like. On a task, the width is controlled by the start date on end date. You know, this is a certain date, that's an end date. On a milestone, it's a representation of one date, so the width is necessary, and the height is in there too. Um, I'll go ahead and continue on the first task to be able to show you the general attributes of the task. Actually, second task. All right, so background, border color, bevel task, all those are pretty self-explanatory aesthetic attributes. Spacing and thickness, let me show you an example of that. So for thickness, if I wanted to get a little thicker here, you know, I'm going to add 10. Oh, I'm sorry, that's spacing. I'm going to add 10 to my thickness. And you're going to see this orange task get thicker, which you just did. When it did get thicker, you notice this moved down because all the spacing is calculated from the bottom of the previous task to the top of whatever your current task is. Spacing is the amount of space in between those two tasks. So if I wanted to make spacing between the task above it and your current task more, I would just go down here, and you're going to see a lot of room fill up in between these two when I build this timeline, which you did. All right, that's pretty easy to understand. Next one, we have two different task box here. This right here these are both labels that help you describe what the task is. This first label anchors itself off to the left, like you've seen a lot of timelines, and stays in the margin. And then the second type is either in the center or after or above or below this taskbar. That'll be entered in by data right here. Let me go through these taskbars. So with this first one, I'll just type task 2. You can see size, underline, italics, bold, all the normal things you usually see. These other things, alignment, height, width, and vertical offset, have more to do with the text box that it's being created with. So all that this is actually doing is drawing a standard text box through PowerPoint. So if you click on Show Text Box Border, it gives you a better idea of how that drawing is working. So I hit Build, and you can see here off to the left, Task 2 has a border, has And you can adjust that border or where it's anchored based on these functions. So let's go ahead and anchor it right and make the width less, just to show you what happens. So the width I made less, I anchored it right. So the thing is right anchored, but it's word wrapping and it's kind of ugly. Gives you an idea of how you can tweak where you want that task to land. So let's do something sensible, a little wider. We can keep it right. Let's take the text box border off, and perfect. All right, moving on to the next one, you have the same controls. Let's go to show text box border again. Type the same thing, task 2 in. Use a color which is a little darker here. And leave it on center. And right there you'll see task 2, actually I pluralized it, task 2 rather, is in the middle. You wouldn't probably use your show text border, but I'm going to leave it on just so you can see what's happening. If I wanted to do the alignment of it, I can do it just like I did on the last one, right, left, and that's to the right. You can change, again, the height and width or the offset of the text box. There's one cell in here that isn't in that other text box area, and that's text placement relative to the taskbar. So right now it's on center, so it's anchored in the center of this text box, but a lot of timelines you want it off to the right or above or below or before it. This gives you the opportunity to do that. So let's go with after task, and you'll see, okay, it popped out to after the task. And if you wanted to do above or below, you would just keep it on center and use this vertical offset here. And you can see it's above. All right. The last thing to show you on a particular task is, actually, it's not the last thing, so there's a couple more. Before I get to this region down here, I want to show you what happens when you click on this checkbox of primary task. So if I click on it, it turns it into a subtask and it blanks out this area. Now why is that? Well, let me build the timeline and show you. It bumped up to here. Now, it did that so you can build multiple tasks on the same line. It blanked this out because now you only have one area to talk about multiple tasks, and that's going to be your first one. So, you know, you can call it task 1 and 2 if you like, off to the left. And again, let's make that width a little wider. And let's anchor it on the right so we can see it. Okay, it's almost in screen, but if we really needed to adjust that, we would go over to the General Attributes tab and change the horizontal position to be a little bit more left. And you can see it again. Also, when I change the dimension there, you see everything adjusted in kind properly. All the taskbars aligned with the date that they were supposed to align with, and the text boxes were anchored with their respective tasks. You might be thinking, well, if I have all these offset tools, why couldn't I just offset the task to be on the same row as the one above it? The reason why is we have these things called global increments up here on the top, and what they do when you increment them is they increment every single field of each task, or every instance of that field in each task, so you can do things like change spacing or thickness in an aggregate. Here's an example. Task thickness, if I want to change and make everything a little bit thicker here, I click on that and you'll see it happens here. It can happen in the milestones. Let me do a couple more tasks just to show that a little better. Okay, make text thickness even bigger. Okay, so now you got some big honking task here. Let's make it smaller. And they all get smaller. The subtask functionality allowed these things to stay into proportion. When I was trying to build it by using offsets, it got kind of confusing as being able to change those global parameters if you didn't know how much spacing was relative to more than one task. This way, the spacing is always relative to the first task, and all the other tasks in line will get spaced in kind. So in this instance, what if I wanted to space everything out a bit? Then I would do the global spacing a little bit. I'm sorry, I just put it down. Let me do it higher, a little bit higher that time, and you see them all move in kind. So that's what subtask does. You can do multiple subtasks here, and you can make them a milestone if you like. This one, let's go ahead and make this one a milestone. You can, I'm going to change it to a star. Do another subtask that's not a milestone after that. And you're going to see it populates up here. I'm sorry, there's two milestones. Let me take that, or yeah, make that not a milestone. That's the milestone, and we want one more subtask here. There we go. And this one should now pop up here. Okay. So you can see on this line now, you've got all kinds of fun stuff, and they're all linked together, as you can see here. All right, one more thing I want to show you, and that's this area down here. Actually, before I do that, let me just show you a couple other things on these global options. Milestones, you can change their attributes as much as you want right here. You can move it forward a month, 2 months, 3 months, a couple of days. Every date should move forward that much, which I just did. Task spacing, we already went over. The rest of these global offsets are for, or incrementers are for this portion down here. Now this portion down here is rarely ever used, and it's possible I shouldn't have built it in, but it's for a particular type of timeline. A lot of times if you do a Gantt chart or a roadmap, you want task areas to be separated by lines. So in this instance, if you click on it, voila, a line pops up underneath that area. It also gives you the ability to extend it further left, right here. So you can include the title and the feel of separation. That didn't go far enough. And the rest of the stuff here, line thickness, that's obvious. Spacing, that's just how much space you want that line to be after the task. And line color, that's obvious too. So let's just go ahead and throw that capability here on a couple more things to give you an idea of the look and feel. And now to give you an idea of the global incrementer. Now, except for that one, which we've already done down to 58, let's bring this back to 0. Now let's increment them all together right here up to around 60. And that should bring them all out here. Oops, went the wrong way. Sorry, that's right. Need to go left. Oh, I didn't hit the global incrementer. I hit the one line. So if I hit the global incrementer, I will bring everything left 60. There we go. No, I think they weren't. So if I bring the global incrementer to bring everything left 60, I'm able to bring them out uniformly. And in this instance, you know, we could continue to fill these out as needed. And you could, again, change the spacing on everything. Say we wanted to bring everything a little tighter, or a little further out rather, and we got more space. So one of the strengths, like you just saw, if you want to add one more, let's do that for example. We don't have a lot of room here. What if we needed to add one more? All right, so first thing we're going to do is let's make the spacing less and the thickness on everything less. So I'm taking the thickness down, taking the spacing down. Oh, that's too little. Everything's on top of each other. Bring the spacing up. Oh, I went the wrong way. Okay, so now we got some room to add one more. What if we didn't want to add it on the bottom? Let's add it in between task 4 and 5. So we got task 4 here, add a duplicate. We'll call that is just new task. And let's make it not a milestone. Add it in here. That's a pretty quick way to add a new task. We took the lines out. Let's add those back in. Pretty quick way to add a new task. Okay, one last thing I'll show you is all these general specifics, all these tasks bars will change with the size and shape of the timeline or the date. So if we wanted to make the dates, for example, a lot further out, a lot longer span, let's go ahead and do that. So you got static number of dates in here, and all of a sudden you have a completely different view from an 8-year view, or I'm sorry, not an 8-year, but a 5-year view versus a 2 or 3-year view, and they're all correct as far as the way the timeline works. I hope that answers most of the questions you might have. I don't think I'm missing much. The one piece of advice I can give when using this is there's a lot of functions, and when you're first tinkering with it, it seems like you're trying to fly a 747, but once you get a hang of understanding that everything is just related to each other and there's an offset with vertically and horizontally, it's pretty easy to be able to get it to do what you want to do fairly quickly and then use it over and over again to be able to increment whatever timeline you have. So lastly, if you did want to increment something, there's no saving required. Whenever you hit build timeline, it saves it. If you X out of this and you save this file and open it back up, you're going to see the same thing and you're going to have the same values. The only thing you have to remember to do is when you hit macros and you go to launch form here, you don't hit start new timeline, you hit load save data. And then the same thing will come up, all the same values that you had before.